Hello and welcome back to the show, World War II Books Where to Start. I'm your host, Charles de Gaulle, sitting here in my London headquarters, waiting to take over the world, my style. Today we're going to do something about Winnie, and only Winnie, and primarily one book by Sir Max Hastings, Churchill's War, 40 to 45. This is from 2009, 483 pages, main body. So I went into this with great expectations a la Charles Dickens, and I came out slightly baffled and disgruntled. So I'm a big fan of Max Hastings. I think he's a fantastic writer, and I've mentioned I think he's better in the overall stuff, survey stuff, than he is in detailed on one operation, a la Operation Pedestal. But here I think he kind of goes off the rails a little bit. I think he wanders into fanboy territory. Let me explain. So this is just about Winston's leadership during World War II, right when he takes over the premiership, May 10th, 40. So as you would expect, Battle of Britain's bam right there. The stuff with the fall of France and finding his feet with Parliament and all that, it's kind of flat and it doesn't take off for a while. It finally takes off with Battle of Britain, but he doesn't make Battle of Britain the main course. I guess that's good, even though it's his biggest moment on the world stage, right? It's where he really established himself as a world leader and resistant to Nazi thuggery, and we're going to win this thing, even though we have no evidence we can do it. That's his big shining moment on the public stage. Ta-da! But Max does not make that the centerpiece. So it's kind of an interesting choice there. And maybe he didn't want to front load the book and have people just throw it back on the shelf after that. I don't know. But the book doesn't take off until that point. And from there on, it's elevated, but it never goes to the heights of Everest. And I'm kind of surprised. He says in his intro he has over 100 books on Winston Churchill in his private library. So he's kind of stayed with those and hasn't gone beyond much of that to vast secondary sources. And you can understand why. He's done his research over his time. He knows what he's talking about. But I find there are some instances of severe cherry picking here. So he could have done a 2-volume, 3-volume here, and his publishers wouldn't have blinked. They would have gone with it. Winston sells, Max sells. It's a win-win, right? He could have done 2 or 3-volume here easily, and no questions would have been asked. But he doesn't. And it's not even like an 800-pager, 1 volume. It's under 500 slightly. So there's cherry picking here. He doesn't cover everything, nor does he give everything the amount of attention it needs, and especially the nautical stuff. The Bismarck episode is hardly touched on. He does mention the attempted court-martial after the fact, but just in like 1 or 2 sentences. He doesn't cover the hissy fit Churchill had during the Bismarck chase, nor the importance he ascribed to catching the Bismarck and what it meant for British prestige and control of the sea, and the message it would send if the Bismarck had somehow docked successfully after sinking the hood. There's none of that. It's totally ignored. As well as the U-boat war. As sick as I am of British historians overvaluing the U-boat war, here he just completely tosses it in the garbage pail. It's mentioned 2 or 3 times and passing that it was important to control the sea lanes. Okay. Despite Churchill's award-winning quote about the only thing that ever scared me during the war was the U-boat peril. He doesn't even have that quotation there. How do you ignore that? It's inconceivable. The Prince of Wales and Repulse are covered, and then he makes this startling declaration about the obsolescence of battleships. Well, we've all heard that old saw, battleships are obsolescent with the advent of air power. Okay, great. But several other authors have pointed out this was the first instance where battleships under sail, full steam, and defenses manned were sunk in open water. First time. Taranto, they were in harbor at night. Pearl Harbor, they were in harbor at daybreak. The Queen Elizabeth and Valiant were torpedoed by the human torpedoes of the Italian SAS, or MAS, the following year, 41, late 41. And Rudel dive-bombed the Soviet battleship, I think in the summer of 42. But I have to look that up to be sure. This is the first instance, Repulse and POW, that battleships under sail, fully manned and armed and prepared, are sunk in open waters by aircraft. So there's no call to immediately call them obsolescent right there and then. It's a big warning sign, but it's not ipso facto that they are defunct. And in fact, the British used battleships well in the Atlantic. The Germans used battleships and battlecruisers as raiders in the Atlantic. And the U.S. Navy and Japan used battleships at Guadalcanal, inside of air attack perimeter. And of course, the Japanese paid the price for it, and that's when the battleships became obsolete in the late summer of 42. But here in the spring of 41, it's premature to say that, and Hastings ought to know better, and he doesn't. So I took umbrage at that, shall we say, as you might be able to tell. But wait, there's more. So he claims that Churchill had virtually no interest in the Far East and really didn't care about Burma. Really? He had a hissy fit about Singapore falling in early 42 when it did. He was absolutely livid about it. There was a lot of chatter at him to the Far East Command and the overall theater commanders about what the hell happened there. And to say he's not interested in Burma, well, he could have stopped the campaign, right? He's Minister of Defense and Prime Minister. If he wasn't that concerned about it, he could have told America to go to hell, because America's not going to port troops in there. So he could have said, we don't need to hump. If you want to worry about China, you worry about China. I'm going to sit on the defense in India. Bleh, what are you going to do? He could have done that, but he didn't. He was kind of all armies must advance on all fronts, so we must always engage the enemy. Even an enemy he didn't care about in Japan, that does not make sense, and it doesn't play well. So I'm not believing it. He doesn't mention the Bengali, well, he does mention the Bengali famine towards the intro, I think. One sentence only. When 44 comes around and the Bengali famine happens, not a word, not a whisper, not a breath of it, not nothing. There's not nothing there. And that's a major indictment of Churchill and his humanity, or his attitude towards colonial peoples, especially in India today. They are still not thrilled about Churchill still being a hero. It's a big deal. You have to speak to the Bengali famine and what his role in it, and could he have averted it, could he have mitigated it, as well as I ran across another book called Three Famines, History of the Irish Potato Famine, the Bengali famine, and the one in Ethiopia. That guy mentions that FDR offered shipping and food to Churchill in 44 to help mitigate it in case the British couldn't quite meet their obligations there. And Churchill turned it down. Does Hastings mention that? Nope, not a whisper of it. That's a whoopsie. So that's feeding back into the fanboy thing, right? Total fanboy here, going off the rails, picking and choosing how he wants to present Churchill. Now, he does present his negatives at times. He does present, his stubbornness, obstinacy, and some of his off-the-rail fantasy, especially his obsession with Norway. Hitler and Churchill had mirror image obsessions with Norway as a deciding factor in the war. Kind of amusing. So he does present that, and he presents his bitterness about the Mediterranean strategy being eschewed, and stripping troops out of Italy really burned his ass, as well as his flights of fancy about the Ljubljana Gap. He never shut up about that. And of course, the Dodecanese, he does cover that, and that makes me want to get a book on the Dodecanese, because he does cover that in a good amount of detail, and I've never seen that before. I always see it mentioned in passing. That's a good little scandal and a good little whoopsie that I knew virtually nothing about. Fantastic there. But then let's go back to the omissions. Chandra Bose, a traitor, has lunch with Himmler, has a photo op with Hitler. Pictures are all over the world. Hastings has nothing to say. You tell me that didn't burn Churchill's ass? Oh, come on, man. India is his pet project. It's his backyard. It's his glory days. You're telling me Chandra Bose didn't burn his ass in the middle of the night? Stop it. Stop it. That's just, it's not right. There's a long chapter on SOE that I found waffling and middling. Take it or leave it. There's the bit about him not liking Monty, which I didn't know before. He was not fond of Monty. He thought him vulgar and a bit crude. Not a gentleman, not one of us kind of thing, which you would actually kind of expect if you think about it for 2 seconds. But I've never seen it in print before, so it's kind of interesting. And he says when he never recovered from the pneumonia he had after the Tehran conference, he flew back to Cairo. Pneumonia, had 2 minor heart attacks there, which I haven't seen either. Now, I know about the the heart issue in the White House in 41 when he was visiting, labeled as angina pectoris. But I never heard that he actually had 2 heart attacks later on in Cairo. So that's kind of a fascinating little tidbit I hadn't seen before. Okay, so this guy lived to be 90, and of course his last 5 years or so were pretty miserable health-wise. But Hastings is going to say his really big health debacle started here. And you can understand why. He's a cigar smoking, cigarette smoking, fish with the alcohol. He's grossly overweight, carrying the burdens of the world on his shoulders. It's amazing he lasted as long as he did. It's amazing he didn't drop dead during the war. It really is. But that's kind of a nice little tidbit I picked up from here. Let's see. What else did I not? Oh yeah, terrified of Overlord. We've seen that before. He was really terrified about Overlord, and so was Alan Brooke. And this is explored far more in depth here. And that was actually not too dull for me. I actually got through that okay. I thought it was kind of interesting that he was to the bitter end, just chewing his nails over this thing. And of course, he wanted to witness the D-Day landings in person offshore, and Alan Brooke wouldn't let him anywhere near it because he was afraid he was going to try to take control of the operation. Probably a wise choice there. Makes too much out of Alan Brooke. Everybody makes too much out of Alan Brooke. I can't understand it. He's a staff officer shuffling papers and shouting Winnie down when he has a harebrained idea. Okay, whatever. He's directing people here and there. He's not George Marshall. Sorry, he's not. He's not nearly that caliber. I don't care what anybody says. He's not. What else? Greek liberation. That was kind of new material to me. I've seen it in passing. Of course, we got the naughty paper Churchill passed to Stalin in 44 when he made his unilateral trip to Moscow. Spheres of influence that FDR had a hissy fit about. And then actually covering the liberation of Greek when Churchill sends in troops. The Germans are retreating kind of voluntarily as they're retracting to the homeland. And Churchill's trying to prevent the outbreak of civil war, pretty much occupying a liberated country and enforcing the law and order there, trying to restore the king, which was unsuccessful eventually. So that was kind of new material. Didn't prevent the Civil War post-war from breaking out, but that's another whole can of beans right there, right? So that was kind of interesting as new material, or new material to me. He goes on to Operation Unthinkable. And here I'll give Max full credit. He actually covers Operation Unthinkable in some amount of detail. I've never seen anything, but it was posited as, let's put this together as a staff paper and see how it will work out. That's the end of it. Max actually goes through the military preparations and what they thought they would need to fight the Soviets. Best case scenario, worst case scenario. And wow, fascinating. That's actually good. Kudos to him there. So overall, 3 stars. Really. I went into this expecting it to be an automatic 5-star checkoff, put to sleep and no questions asked, but really let me down in a lot of areas. And I would say that Churchill's war, or Winston's war, doesn't do anything better than this book. And in many instances, a lot worse. World War II Behind Closed Doors by Lawrence Reeves. I've covered this before a while back in another vid. It might have been just a best of. I'm not quite sure. Can't quite remember. But if you haven't read this gem, read this gem now. It's phenomenal. You might want to read Winnie first and then this. I don't know. Or you might just want to go with this. I don't know. And I would say also, the thing about this is a big caveat here, which I ought to have put at the beginning of the show. But the big caveat here is that your reaction to this one may depend entirely upon your previous exposure to Winston. If you are not too knowledgeable about him, or you've just seen him in passing and this kind of appeals to you in a bookstore, yeah, it's probably an A-lister. But if you've wandered around the war for decades like I have, and you've already done a lot of Winston material, then this is too late in the day. And it's got a lot of issues, as I have shown. But I have not read a full-length bio of Churchill, although I do have this beast by Roy Jenkins, gifted to me many, many years ago. And I read the intro and the first part of the first chapter, and I went, whoa, hit the brakes, baby. Way too deep for me already. I just did not have enough background on Churchill at that point to attempt an 800-page bio, stem to stern on him. And so it's been waiting patiently, and I'm probably going to take it up here within the next 2 years or so, I think. I think I've got all the bases covered. I think I can handle it now. But this is definitely too deep for any beginner on this, unless you're a glutton for punishment. And then also I'd say Carl d'Este's Warlord, which is going to cover Winston's military career from his days in India to Africa, the Boer War, everything he did in uniform, plus the premiership for the Second World War. That's fantastic. Carl d'Este was I think he's passed away. He was a great writer. Not always riveting, because he was painstaking in his assessments and his paragraph by paragraph sometimes to just about Rivet County material, territory. So at times he could bog down, but at Warlord I think is one of his finest hours, shall we say. It's fantastic, and it's an easy read. So that's my take on Churchill. Grinding an axe today, I am. But that's because I'm Charles de Gaulle, and if there's one thing you need to know about Charles, he likes to grind an axe. Until next time, happy reading.